He walked into that ER like he owned it. Loud, rushed, wearing a $1,000 suit and a face full of stress. His son was gasping for air in his arms, barely conscious, pale, wheezing. But instead of calling for help, he started yelling demands, like he was at a hotel, not a hospital. Where's the real doctor? Can someone competent help my son? But here's the thing. The woman standing right in front of him was the help. The surgeon. The only one trained to operate on his child's heart. She stood calm, still, scrubs on, clipboard in hand, eyes focused on the boy's breathing. She had seen this before, and she already knew time was running out. But he didn't look at the boy. He looked at her. And then came the line, "Are you even supposed to be here?" Loud, sharp, dismissive, like she was invisible. Or worse, like she didn't belong at all. The nurses froze. A tech dropped a pen. Someone whispered, "Did he really just say that?" She didn't answer, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She just turned away and walked straight toward the operating room. Because what he didn't know, what he refused to even imagine was that she wasn't some assistant. She was the lead surgeon, the one who'd flown in from another hospital just for this case. The one who'd saved more lives in 1 month than he'd closed deals in a year. And in less than 10 minutes, she was going to cut open his son's chest and save the life he claimed to care about. But first, she had to let the silence teach him what words never could. He thought the worst was over, that once he'd barked enough orders, the universe would obey. But just as a nurse rolled his son toward the trauma bay, he leaned in and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "I don't want her touching my boy." And that's when the whole room shifted. The air got tight. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath, a younger nurse, barely out of training, looked up from the monitor. Her hands stopped moving. She'd heard that tone before more times than she could count. The coded language of privilege, the kind that doesn't scream, but slices. People like that. Not one of us. Probably a DEI hire. And just like that, the mask slipped. This wasn't just a worried father. This was a man who'd already decided who was worthy, who belonged, who didn't. But the crazy part? She heard him, every word, and she still didn't react, didn't raise her voice, didn't defend herself. She just kept prepping for surgery, like nothing had been said, like her dignity wasn't on the line. Because for her, this wasn't new, this wasn't shocking, this was Tuesday. But for everyone else in that hallway, that whisper echoed louder than a scream. And the moment it happened, people started watching. Not just the nurses, not just the techs, the administrators, the residents, even the security guard near the vending machines. They were all waiting to see what she'd do, if she'd fight back or walk away. And that's when it hit them she wasn't going to do either. She was going to lead, with silence, with skill, with the kind of calm you only earn after proving yourself 1,000 times in rooms where you never should have had to. That whisper, it didn't break her. It exposed him. He was pacing now, arms folded, voice getting louder by the second. Why is this taking so long? Is anyone even in charge here? He was spiraling, but not because of fear, because he wasn't in control. His son had been wheeled behind closed doors, monitors beeping, oxygen pumping, and the only person he'd seen step into that room was her. The black woman he refused to acknowledge, the one he thought didn't belong. And now, his panic was turning into a public show. A nurse tried to calm him, but he waved her off. "Don't touch me. Someone offered to bring coffee." He snapped back, "I'm not here for snacks." Phones started coming out, quietly, discreetly, but aimed right at him. Because people weren't just watching now, they were recording, tweeting, whispering. That's the guy who snapped at the surgeon. He told her not to touch his kid. This is about to blow up. And the wildest part? He still didn't get it. He still thought he was the victim, that the world was out to get him. But meanwhile, behind those ER doors, she was scrubbing in. reviewing scans, coordinating with the pediatric team, moving with precision and purpose. Because while he was throwing a fit in the hallway, she was preparing to save his child's life. And here's what nobody saw coming by the time the operation began. Half the staff had already picked sides. Not because she asked them to, not because she said a single word, but because in a place built on pressure, grace speaks louder than rage. And when the truth finally came out, the meltdown in the hallway was just the warm-up. She stood in the sterile prep room, alone now. No more whispers, no more stares, just silence and steel. The monitor glowed softly beside her as she reviewed the boy's scans. Congenital heart defect, rare, aggressive, dangerous, but not impossible. Not for her. She traced the outline of the anomaly on the screen with her finger, like she was memorizing it. And maybe she was, because when you've spent your whole career having to be twice as perfect just to be seen as qualified, you don't wing it, you own it. She pulled on her gloves, tied her gown, and stared into the mirror. Not at her face, but at everything that had brought her here. Every test she'd aced while people assumed she'd cheated. Every internship she got questioned for. Every patient who asked for someone more experienced while she was literally the most trained person in the room. And now, she wasn't just here to prove a point. She was here to prove him wrong by saving the thing he loved most. But the irony? He wouldn't even know, because when this was over, he'd probably thank someone else. Shake the hand of the male doctor in post-op. Walk past her like she was invisible again. And she was fine with that, because this wasn't about credit. It was about impact. He saw her as a threat. The system saw her as a checkbox. But that child, that little boy on the table, he'd see her as life. And that was enough. It was the charge nurse who finally said it. Quiet, but firm. Just loud enough to carry across the break room. He doesn't even know she's the surgeon. The room paused. Someone looked up from their chart. Another nurse blinked like they just realized they were part of something bigger. Because until that moment, they'd all been silent, watching, tense, unsure how to respond. But now, the mood was shifting. The team was rallying, and the nurse wasn't done. She's the one who trained half of us, the one who rebuilt this entire cardiac program. And he looked at her like she was a janitor. There was no anger in her voice, just truth. Heavy, undeniable truth. Another nurse nodded. Then someone else added, "I hope she doesn't tell him. I hope he finds out." And that was it. The whole floor started buzzing. Not with gossip, but with respect. The kind of respect you don't say out loud, because you don't have to. It's in the way they cleared her path. The way they prepped the OR before she even asked. The way they looked at the father, now not with judgment, but with quiet disbelief. Like, how could someone so loud be so blind? Meanwhile, he was still pacing, still asking for updates, still throwing shade without knowing he was standing in the shadow of the very woman he needed most. But upstairs, the team had already made a choice. They weren't protecting his pride. They were protecting her power. And when that surgical light flipped on, it wasn't just about saving a child. It was about reminding everyone who really runs the room. He was standing by the nurse's station when the double doors swung open. His son was out of surgery, alive, stable, breathing on his own. Relief hit him like a wave. His shoulders dropped. Voice softened, eyes suddenly glossy. "Is he okay?" he asked, barely above a whisper. A young resident smiled. "The surgeon will speak with you shortly." He nodded fast. Yes, please. I want to thank him personally." That's when the door opened again. But it wasn't a man who walked out. It was her. Calm, composed, still in her gown, gloves off, surgical cap tucked neatly behind her ear. And for a split second, he didn't move, like his brain couldn't process it. Like the universe had glitched. She walked straight up to him. No smugness, no revenge, just professionalism wrapped in power. "Your son is stable. We repaired the defect. He's in recovery now." His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no words came out. Because the woman he dismissed, ignored, insulted, just saved his world. And now, he had nothing to say. Not a thank you. Not an apology. Just silence. The kind that stings. The kind that says, "I know what I did, and I know you know it too." But she didn't gloat, didn't mention his words, didn't drag him. She just nodded and turned away. Because for her, the work was done. The statement had been made, not with a clapback, but with a scalpel. And the crazy part? That moment there, walking away, hit harder than any speech ever could. He sat by his son's bedside, holding that tiny hand like it was the last lifeline he had. Machines beeped softly around them. Monitors steady, heartbeat strong. His son was going to be okay. But he wasn't. Not really. Because now, he knew that the woman he humiliated, dismissed, and whispered about had done what he couldn't. She saved his boy quietly, brilliantly, without needing praise. And suddenly, every word he said in that hallway started echoing in his head. "Are you supposed to be here? I don't want her near my kid." Someone more qualified. They weren't just mistakes. They were reflections of him, of the man he really was when nobody was watching except they were watching. The nurses, the staff, the phones, the internet. His meltdown had gone viral. A short clip, no context, just him yelling while a black woman walked calmly past. Comments were piling up. Typical. She saved his kid and he still looked disgusted. This is why representation matters. And the thing that cut deepest? He couldn't deny any of it. Because the moment she walked out of that OR, he'd seen it in her eyes. Not anger, not pity, just power. And now, sitting next to his son, all he could think was, she had every right to let him fail. But she didn't. She chose mercy. And that choice hurt more than any insult ever could. He caught her just before she left, outside the recovery wing, sunlight pouring through the glass. Her shift was over, coat folded neatly over her arm, ID badge swinging by her hip. He opened his mouth, tried to find something to say. I didn't know," he muttered, weak, hollow. Too late. She turned, slowly, looked him in the eye. And in that moment, he saw everything. The restraint, the strength, the 1,000 invisible battles she fought just to stand there and be recognized, not as a diversity hire, not as some quota, but as the best. She didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. She didn't offer forgiveness, because she didn't owe it. She just gave a nod, subtle, final, and walked away. That nod said everything. "I did my job. Your son's alive, but you still don't see me." He stood there frozen, still holding the words he thought would fix it. But how do you apologize for seeing someone as less than human? For assuming skin color meant lack of skill? For mistaking excellence for inexperience? You don't. You just live with it. Every time you hear her name, every time your son runs into your arms, every time someone asks, "Who saved him?" And all you can say is, "A woman I didn't even see coming." A week later, he was back at the hospital, clean suit, better attitude, and a forced smile. He'd booked a meeting with the board, said he wanted to talk business, something about hospital donations, PR cleanup, optics. But what he didn't know was who chaired the meeting. He stepped into that conference room, briefcase in hand, then stopped cold. At the head of the table, her. No scrubs, no gloves, just a sharp black blazer and a calm, unreadable expression. She wasn't just a surgeon. She was the hospital's chief of surgery. And she'd been promoted before that operation ever happened. The surgery didn't make her a leader. It just reminded everyone why she already was one. The room was silent. You could hear the click of her pen as she tapped it once, then spoke. "You wanted to discuss partnerships?" His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Because in that moment, he realized she wasn't just the person he insulted. She was the one who owned the table. And now he was the one on the outside asking for permission to come in. The same man who said she didn't belong was now waiting for her approval. The irony was thick. The power shift was complete. And she just listened. Patient, professional, unbothered. Because true power doesn't scream. It doesn't clap back. It sits quietly and lets the room adjust to it. He walked out of that boardroom a different man. Not because he got what he wanted. He didn't. But because he finally saw what he almost destroyed with nothing but his own bias. And the wildest part? She never raised her voice, never made a scene, never dragged him online, or demanded an apology. She didn't need to. Her excellence did all the talking. And now, every time he looked at his son, he saw her. In the second chance, in the steady heartbeat, in the miracle he almost blocked because of a split-second judgment. The truth is, people like her exist everywhere. Brilliant, qualified, quietly carrying entire systems on their backs while being ignored, questioned, or underestimated. And the question is, how many more will we overlook before it costs us something we can't afford to lose? Because this time, he was lucky. But next time, that whisper in the hallway could cost a life. So ask yourself, would you have guessed it? Would you have seen her? Or would you have looked right through her too? Comment what you would have done.